Good day, folks. I'm Wayne Duvenage, and this is OUTA's weekly wrap for the 20th of February, 2026. This week has not been short on drama. We've seen senior police officials contradict one another under oath. We've seen municipal leaders formally charged after being suspended. We saw the public protector recuse herself from investigating a romantic partner. And we heard of plans to deploy the SANDF into gang-affected communities and trying to deal with illegal mining. We're going to talk a bit about that. And we've also heard of an invalid 263 million rand water tanker tender roll out while the taps run dry. Lots of different headlines, but the reality is there's one pattern, and it is that of institutional strain, maladministration, and an environment really where corruption thrives. So let's unpack this, and let's do so carefully. At the center of gravity this week remains the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. And this was not Shadrack Sibiya's first appearance at the commission. This is his second time on the stand. And remember, earlier in his testimony, Sibiya denied that he had an improper relationship with Nhlanhla, and he defended his decision to disband the Political Killings Task Team, the PKTT as it's known. Well, this week, under further questioning and in light of additional evidence placed before the commission, he was confronted with these WhatsApp exchanges, the allegations of luxury vehicles being arranged, and his role, the role of Muzi Nhlanhla in his relationships, and also again the timing of the disbanded PKTT. And you know, in the first appearance, the emphasis was on procedure. But what we're seeing now is in the second appearance, the focus has shifted into the proximity of influence, and the proximity, by the way, of people have influence over him. And again, he denied being a close friend or having a compromised relationship with Nhlanhla. But this time around, it was good to see how the commission drilled deeper and went into issues of whether that relationship, no matter how he tries to frame it or label it, it does give the appearance of influence. And where influence happens, this is a serious matter, because the crux of this is that policing with influence from external sources matters just as much as instructions being given from the top. And so what we saw also that Sibiya reiterated that the instruction to disband the PKTT came from National Commissioner Fannie Masemola. But Masemola's earlier testimony doesn't align with that claim, and neither does Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's account of the situation. So what we have now are multiple versions of the same story and contestation of that. So it's going to be very interesting how we see the commission deal with this, which is done under testimony, and we really want to see how the credibility test is sharpened here, because what happens here is we believe the commission will arrive at findings and recommendations that are going to sift through the conflicts here and hopefully shed some light onto what they think really happened. And from that, we want to see meaningful accountability and consequences flow. And, you know, as we know, with a new and rather astute Andy Matibi heading up the NPA, we're hopeful that charges will begin to flow, because it's important to know that the NPA doesn't, and the police don't have to wait till the end of the commission. They can start gathering evidence now and start bringing charges while the commission continues. So this all just boils down to exposure without consequences is going to breed cynicism in society, and the Madlanga Commission has to ensure that they deal with that. But again, what we saw is a week where discipline at Ekurhuleni came to the fore again. And what we're seeing is a significant shift in what's unfolding. What we have is Advocate Kemi Behari, who is the head of legal services and risk at Ekurhuleni, as well as Linda Gxasheka, who was HR head, now have been formally charged after being suspended in early December. Well, you know, this is good. The Ekurhuleni mayor confirmed this week that both have been served with charge sheets and will appear before the city's disciplinary committee. Do you have hope that this city's disciplinary committee is going to take stern and tough action against these individuals? But actually what we want to see is going well beyond the city's disciplinary committee. We want to see the NPA and the police getting involved. We want to see charges laid, and we hope the city brings formal charges against them, and we want to see them in the dock and hopefully in orange overalls. That's what's meaningful for civil society. What we've also seen recently is Action SA has distanced themselves publicly from their governing partners and arrangements at the Metro. And so there's a lot of reshuffling that is happening, and a lot of visible tension between the coalition partners taking place. So the leadership energy in the Ekurhuleni Metro has shifted towards survival now. This is a case of covering each other's backs. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens at the local elections at the end of this year, because hopefully the electorate is going to realize that political turbulence is just not an excuse for administrative failure. The time for change in this metro is long overdue. Moving over to the Madlanga Commission, which has also exposed Ekurhuleni's situation as just being a classic case of political interference and patronage, which has given rise to this, and we've seen how there's been this lack of discipline and consequences. And so what we have is Behari and Gxasheka and the former Metro manager, Imogen Mkhwanazi, all facing allegations of protecting former EMPD Deputy Chief Julius Mkhwanazi from disciplinary action. Now, they might deny those allegations, but what we're beginning to see is otherwise. And let's just unpack this. In 2023, or was it 2022, I'm not sure, but the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, known as IPID, recommended that Julius Mkhwanazi face disciplinary action after he was accused of unlawfully authorizing the installation of blue lights on vehicles belonging to Nhlanhla. And it wasn't 3 months after that recommendation from IPID, that Julius Mkhwanazi was promoted. Let that sink in a bit. He was promoted. Something is seriously wrong here. He also later acted as the head of the department while Chief Isaac Mapayiya was suspended. Now, Mapayiya himself was suspended in 2024 following sexual harassment complaint, and he's received his salary all this time. So we need to consider this further. IPID names Julius Mkhwanazi also as being one of the suspects with another three involved in the murder of Emmanuel Mabenze. And remember, Emmanuel Mabenze, if you don't remember, is a father of five who was allegedly tortured and murdered by law enforcement and private security officers before being dumped in a dam. The Commission also heard that vetting failures were allowed to take place, and more than 200 convicted criminals were allowed to serve within the EMPD since 2022 without any proof of being removed. And former Deputy Chief Revo Species testified that Julius Mkhwanazi refused to undergo vetting and blocked the vetting in his division. Let's let that sink in a bit. Here's a senior Metro police official allegedly refusing vetting and facing no immediate consequences. This is not a glitch. This is what the collapse of a local government policing structure looks like. And this week, or last week at the SONA speech, we heard the President telling us, and he's been telling us this for some time now, that we need to professionalize and improve service delivery in local government. Well, is it happening? We don't sense it. We're just talking here about Ekurhuleni. This type of conduct is happening in many other places. And, suspensions, these are just procedural issues. So are formal charges. What we want to see is prosecution. What we want to see is convictions. This is where accountability is real and meaningful. The public want to see accountability, and that should be our standard. Moving on, also in the Ekurhuleni space, Imogen Mkhwanazi, the former city manager of Ekurhuleni. Remember, some weeks ago, she testified before the Commission under oath and concealed that she failed to act decisively regarding serious issues and maladministration within the Metro Police, including a case of a serial rapist who just remained employed. And she's acknowledged that failure. And now, this week, we hear and see more scrutiny surrounding her regarding her jaunt in a private luxury jet. The questions have to be asked. Who funded this? Was it declared? Were there any conflicts of interest? And it takes an investigative journalist like Jeff Wicks to ask the tough questions publicly. At one point, he was actually effectively signaling that it might be best for those involved in this matter to contact him before he contacts them. And I guess this might have raised some serious nervous pulses, but the sad reality is that accountability in South Africa in government institutions now depends on the likes of Jeff Wicks, who refused to let go. And you'd think that somebody within the structures of power in these municipalities and government departments would do the meaningful digging. And so what's effectively happening is the government and local government structures are just outsourcing to the private sector the ability to get evidence. Are they lacking in skills, or is it political will? This is the sign of an institution where accountability is just really poor to non-existent. But let's unpack some other interesting news that was revealed this week, and that is the relationship between the Public Protector and the Secretary of Parliament. So we heard that Public Protector Advocate Kholeka Gcaleka recused herself from investigating the Secretary of Parliament, who's Xolile George. He's the administrative head and accounting officer of Parliament. This stuff centers around his salary. In 2022, he took up the job. The job offer was a 2.6 million rand per annum package, and he accepted that job. And very shortly thereafter, his package has doubled. Today, it's at between 5 and 6 million rand, depending on what source and interpretation of what total package is. But it's between 5 and 6 million. And yet, a few years ago, he accepted the position at 2.6 million. And then there's also allegations related to a BRICS summit expenditure. So, something has to happen here, because the Public Protector's mandate includes investigating maladministration in Parliament. And when a Chapter 9 institution has to step aside because there's a romantic relationship with the official under potential investigation, this is a serious matter. And we must say, to date, we've been rather impressed with the Public Protector's work since taking over this office from Busisiwe Mkhwanazi. Remember her, the disgraced previous Public Protector. And while we acknowledge the fact that Kholeka has recused herself, the recusal is a reactive situation. And the real question is a structural one. I mean, how does one now address this conflict of interest in these frameworks of oversight bodies? Credibility on such important matters depend on perceived independence. So we ask the question, who's going to investigate this issue now on behalf of the public? Is this just going to disappear into the ether, as it so often does, like headlines today and gone tomorrow? We really need to see and have accountability and a meaningful investigation taking place here, and we'll have to watch this space. Over to another mindless situation. We heard about it last week in the President's SONA speech, and that is the use of the military when it comes to reform. Now, in his SONA speech, we've heard him say this before. We're going to have this knee-jerk reaction of bringing out the army and being now deployed into gang-affected communities, as well as illegal mining. And, community leaders in these gang-affected areas, like they are saying in Athlone, have a right to speak up and express their concerns that nothing is going to solve these problems. Bringing out the army is not going to necessarily resolve the issue. I mean, the army is trained in defensive strategy. It's not designed for sustaining criminal interventions. And remember, we've got to remind ourselves, in Stilfontein, just over a year ago in December 2024, in the Northwest Province, there were daily headlines for weeks where the police, assisted by the army, smoked out and starved out the Zamazamas in Stilfontein mines. Guess what? The Zamazamas are there. They're back. They're mining away as if nothing happened. And this just renders that whole effort, all that expense undertaken, to be meaningless and futile. Again, it just signals a knee-jerk reaction by government without putting in long-term solutions. And we're worried now. What is going to happen? What were they thinking then when they walked away from the mine after getting all the illegal miners out and not putting in place structures and processes that ensured there would be no legal mining going forward? What are they going to do in the gangster-ridden communities when the army does eventually pull out? What are the long-term plans here? So, what you're seeing here, the problem here is not about a lack of force. You've got all the force that you want, even with the compromised military that we have. It's all about the systems that are compromised. You can't deploy an army to fix political interference or the lack of skills and resources in the police. You can't deploy the army to repair fractured command structures or just sort of militarize your way out of institutional decay. And what makes this more of a farce is while all this is happening, we know that this week or next week, nearly 400 million rand is going to be spent on a Defence Force Day parade in Limpopo. Helicopters, ceremonies, military displays of strength. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, our military situation has actually become a joke. The morale is low. Our aircraft and marine protection and the army machinery is at an all-time low, in bad shape. And military generals just ignore instructions from the president regarding the need to exclude Iran from military drills. I mean, once again, where's the accountability? Imagine that a president gives an instruction and it's ignored lower down. And the public want answers. What has happened to the individuals who ignored those instructions from a president? Where's the accountability? I mean, that is almost treason. Yet we don't hear anything. And we need to see the president taking serious action here. But hey, let's parade away. Let's go waste some more taxpayers' money. Just another pathetic display of irrational public spending. But let's talk now about the water crisis. Residents in South Africa's economic hub in Johannesburg continue to face a growing water instability situation. And this week, then, we hear reports that an invalid tender, 263 million rand tanker supply of water to communities, just continues. Something is seriously wrong here. There's nothing nicer for connected cadres to almost create a crisis and then enjoy the introduction of an emergency procurement opportunity. And we've seen that, when you have this emergency procurement, the scrutiny levels are dropped, weak oversight takes place, and we just see the same thread running through, whether it's policing, whether it's municipalities, national governance. It really is a serious problem. And so to the president and his SONA speech on how to deal with the professionalizing of government, well, there's a lot of work to be done. And what we've been saying to the president and to ministers, civil society has a lot of answers, a lot of support to offer, a lot of solutions. But what we do know and what we do see is that when we start to try and introduce those solutions and engage with politicians, they look away, they turn away, they ignore us. And that's the big problem, Mr. President. You need to cascade that message seriously down to your ministers and to their captains within these various departments, because that's where your problem lies. And so what we're going to hear next week, in the coming week, 25th of Feb, is the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, deliver the 2026 budget. And this is where the credibility test lies. After everything we've discussed, Sibiya, Masemola, Mkhwanazi, Behari, Xolile George, procurement failures, the question is simple. Will Treasury use its powers to enforce discipline? And it has got powers. Or are taxpayers going to carry this burden again? OUTA last week submitted its recommendations, as was requested by the Minister of Finance, the theme of which was that South Africa doesn't have a revenue problem. We have a spending discipline and accountability problem. And so what we've called in our recommendations to the Minister is stronger spending discipline tied to measurable outcomes. We need to see a review of the skills development levy, the SETA system. Billions of rands are looted and wasted through gross maladministration and corruption in the SETAs. We've spoken about it. The minister knows about it. The president should know about it. And yet all there is a slight change to push back what was there before. 20% to 40% of the skills development levies back to business. That's not going to solve the problem. The issue is it is structurally defunct. It needs to be fixed. It needs to change, and drastically so. We also need to see, as we've suggested to the Minister of Finance, more capacitation of the criminal justice system and better coordination between SARS and the Hawks, the NPA and the SIU. We need to see reduced expenditure to failing state-owned entities, Denel, Post Office, SABC has a problem. There's so many others that really, some of them are non-core businesses. We should not be in the business of business as a government. We also have asked the Minister of Finance to greatly improve the municipal financial discipline. It's been spoken about a lot. The Auditor General gives a lot of information as to where the weaknesses are, but nothing changes. We've asked for infrastructure spending to be linked to integrity in the procurement systems. It continues unabated. The manipulation of procurement systems for contractors linked to cadres and people connected to high places in government continues unabated. What we don't need to see, and I think he's got that message last year loud and clear, that any increases in taxes. Remember last year this time, the minister was trying to seek a 2% VAT hike, and he was sent back to the drawing board. Under no circumstances will society allow that. Thankfully, parliamentarians did the work that civil society was crying for. And guess what? 6 months later, there was a surplus. They found more money. They saved more costs. That's the type of thinking we needed from day one. And that's the type of thinking we're asking the minister to continue with. There's a lot more savings to be done, and there's a lot more collection of revenues from illicit trade to be gotten. So let's see what he holds in his speech this coming week. So in closing, this week just really showed us more stark revelations of contradictions under oath. The disciplinary collapse in the major metros has just been mind-boggling. And guess what? The ANC-led provincial government, who ought to be stepping in, have just looked away, as they've done so in the city of Joburg and the water crisis. Why? Because this is their cadres. And they don't want to take action against their cadres because it's all linked. It's a connection and a cesspool of corruption and gross maladministration, with people scoring billions of rands in the long run out of this misspending. This lack of oversight is just unacceptable. This military deployment instead of meaningful reform has just become a farce. And these are not isolated incidences. They're all connected to weak government that lacks the political will to hold their cadres and their connected cronies to account. So what do we have to do? We have to keep doing what we do. We have to show government and put pressure that this is not acceptable. We are tired of all the plans and task teams and commissions after commissions. At the end of the day, if no one is fired, if no one is in orange overalls, no one's held accountable, then there's just a lack of consistency and consequences, and the public trust deficit continues to grow. So, political will or not, there is a clear dividing line between reform and the theatrics of government. We've tired of the theatre. We want to see action. And hopefully next week's budget speech is going to send us a little bit more hope in this journey of fixing and reforming the criminal justice system. Let's see what happens. Until next week, folks, stay safe, and let's just keep on this road of demanding accountability. We cannot let this pressure up. Thank you for listening.